Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com. I'm here today at the 2022 Red Ball Military Vehicle Show, and I'm here with Mr. Scott, who is the proud owner of this lovely restored M-706 V100 armored car. And I'm just going to go ahead and pass the torch over to Scott. He can tell me everything he wants to tell me about this wonderful vehicle.
Well, thanks, John. Happy to do it. This is a M-706, as John said. This vehicle was built in 1969, middle of 69, went over to Vietnam in the fall of 69, served there, came back in probably around 72 when most of the troop drawdowns happened. It's basically in original configuration as you'd seen it in Vietnam. The correct size tires, 1400 R20 tires, has a turret which rotates 360 degrees, features twin M73 machine guns.
And it pivots really smoothly, I might add.
Yes, it's pretty easy. You can pretty much run it with one hand.
Yeah.
There's about 150 ball bearings that rotate the track. So
that is true.
It's about 11 or 1200 pound turret, so it does spin pretty easily for considering the weight that's involved. But it's a little tight in space. You know, I keep telling people it's not a tank, right? It doesn't have a big main gun in it. So
and I just sat inside of it to do some filming, and yeah, I can attest that thing is cramped. Yeah. I don't know, and that's what the M73 is. I can't imagine when an M2 fitted on the inside.
Yeah, because it could. Optional guns were an M2 on the left side and a M37 Browning on the right. And when you sit, the M2 is basically the solenoid on it's about that close to your chest. And so if you were driving down the road, that would be
it wouldn't be really fun.
It would be uncomfortable. The usual tradition in Vietnam was they would mount M113 mount for an M2, weld that on top of the turret, and have a socket up there for a 50 cal, and then of course they would also typically add a socket on the back for an M60 machine gun.
And that was how you received it. We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, so there was a lot of in-theater modifications. Another one was probably this guide on the back to keep the gun barrels, so as the turret rotates around, if the gunner had the barrels depressed on the turret, you wouldn't want them to hit either the cooling shield over the Molotov cocktail shield over the radiator, or hit the radio antenna mount. So as the guns would come around, if they were depressed, they would ride up this gate and force them to go to make sure that you didn't do any damage in the heat of combat.
And it probably wouldn't feel good if you were an M60 gunner back there either.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm sure you'd duck if you saw that thing.
An M73 bearing down now. Yeah.
So that's basically kind of the outside surface. Guns equipped, or the vehicle's equipped with numerous pistol ports or grenade ports. They're double-sided, so they basically act like a double shield inside and out, so you can unscrew the knob, open it up, and then, usually with a vision block nearby, so you could stick your rifle out and look out. It's 13 layers of laminate glass, about 3 inches thick, bulletproof. The entire hull is armor. It's a 1/4 inch on the sides, 3/8 on the bottom.
Did you have to do any welding to repair the hull?
No, the hull was all there. There was a crack on the other side that was repaired. It was repaired well. So the challenge with these vehicles, in order to armor them, they basically took the entire hull, which is a monocoque chassis. It's like basically a giant bathtub or a boat, and they would dip it in a molten cyanide, sodium cyanide bath, and it came out, I think it's like AR 550. Most guys know that because if you shoot steel plates or steel targets for pistol shooting, that's the armor they use. But it made it a little brittle. So if there was already stress in the hull, and you made it brittle, and then of course you take it out into combat, and
which has been a problem with some of the. I remember I read reading the early production V100s. The armor would just crack, would rip, and then
the early ones had 2 windows here.
Yeah.
They had a second window, and then they had a notched wheel opening, like a square, and of course that's a stress riser, right, if you have an angle. So the first thing they did was put in the rounded wheel arch, and they took out one of the windows to help strengthen this general area, because, like I say, it's a monocoque chassis. It doesn't have a frame under it. So all the load of the suspension is mounted at this leaf spring here and about here. And guess what's in the middle? This is where the cracks are, the fuel tank opening. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of stress in this area, and this is usually where they all crack.
The fuel tanks are on either side of the bow?
Yes, there's 2 on the side of the bow, so it has an armored cover over the fuel tank. And otherwise the cap is pretty much like it's a non-vented. The vent for the fuel system is up here under the hatch.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, so it's a non-vented cap.
Well, that's going to help me out.
There you go. Now that's a level of detail. If you're getting the fuel tank vents, you're doing detail. So these tanks are integral to the hull. This is basically a welded off compartment.
Okay.
So the tank is not removable. So to restore this tank, I had to go armpit deep for about 25 hours of scraping, pressure washing, and then coating it with Por 15 to make it a new tank.
Is she amphibious or?
Yes, so this vehicle floats without preparation. You just drive it in the water.
Have you done that yet?
I have not. There's a gentleman in Georgia who owns one of these, and he swam his.
It's on YouTube.
Video's on YouTube.
Video on YouTube.
That's
Seen that
right.
one?
So I don't have to do it.
A quick shout out to that guy.
Yes,
I have seen your video.
Yes, Jason did a great job with that, and I appreciate him for doing that because then it saves all the rest of us the work. Moving around the front, I have there's a 10,000-pound winch in the front.
Which, if you're a fan of the channel, you'll be seeing this information very soon.
There you go, yes. This is the level of detail. And then the winch operator controls are inside the vehicle. Obviously, for safety, you can duck down behind the glass.
Right.
Run your winch and your snatch block outs or whatever and try to pull yourself out, but in case of a winch cable failure.
What's the capacity on the winch?
10,000 pounds.
Okay.
So I have not tried the winch. I don't want to get stuck because I don't have an armored recovery vehicle to come get me out.
Yeah, you need an M88 for that.
Yeah, and so it has lifting hooks on the front and on the rear, so they can lift this up and put it on a ship. Another in-theater modification, somebody put a mount for an M60. They probably had it on a pipe, maybe spade grips. Or maybe for a spotlight. So there's a lot of in-theater stuff as guys needed stuff. They would just take it to the motor pool, I think, get the welder out. And,
yeah, if you go, I'm just going to say to the viewers, if you go on Critical Pass, he has a lot of in-theater footage of these things being used by the MPs, and you'll see tons of different differences between the two.
I've seen where there was a pipe welded in the center with an elbow on either side so that either the driver could use it or the vehicle commander could use it. Like whoever needed a gun, there was plenty of guns, they would kind of bristle after a while. Yeah. Which makes sense. So
you can never have enough firepower.
Never have enough firepower. These mirrors are, the original ones were the round convex mirror on the short stem. Obviously for safety on the road, I have to have a higher mounted regular mirror and the original convex. Again, normally it just had the single one, but obviously I drive this on the street, so for safety reasons you have to have adequate mirrors. Pretty much the same idea with the pistol ports all the way around. This is the other side tank. I haven't restored this one yet.
Oh, so you're only running on one fuel tank?
One fuel tank. It's 40 gallons in each side. So this is what they look like before you restore. They get really rusty, and so to clean it, the only way to do it is to put your arm in the hole.
And because it's welded in, you can't do the gravel tumbler technique.
No, right. It's not like the guys say, take the tank out, put the tank cleaner in it, tumble it around for an hour. It's you with a scrape brush. And the drain cock for the tank is on the front.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, that's what that hole is. So
okay, yeah, I saw there was some kind of a drain.
So I had this one out just because the tank isn't functioning.
Right, that makes sense.
And anything that's in there, hopefully all the rust will drop off and drop out the bottom.
Yeah.
But once you restore them, and I can send you some pictures, John, it's like new once you coat it with Por 15, and that will last your lifetime. We recently,
me and my father did the same type of thing to our bulldozer gas tank.
Yep.
And I gotta warn you, two words: sediment filter. You cannot get a good sediment filter because if there's one little flake in there, it'll plug up the whole works.
Yes, and you get religion after you've had to clean out a bad fuel system. You really become a fanatic about clean.
Specifically if it's carburetor.
Yes, and it'll stop you right. And it's a hell of a way to have a breakdown over something like that.
And on that note, what's powering this thing?
All right, let's look at the powertrain in the back. So the engine is mounted in the rear on the driver's side. This is a 361B Chrysler engine, gasoline. The B was their original kind of big block. This is before they went to the RB, the raised block that I think everybody knows about, the 440s and the famous Dodge muscle car engines. This engine was used in some Dodge cars in the early 60s, like the Polaras and Chrysler Imperials, etc. It was more like their big car.
So dare I say, does it have a Hemi?
No, it does not have a Hemi, but it's the Mopar guys let me in their car show. So this was basically, Chrysler made this in it's called a ruggedized version. They called it the M75 military or industrial engine. The same engine was used in M113 armored personnel carriers in the early 60s.
Before they switched to diesel.
Before they went to diesel.
For obvious reasons.
Experience in Vietnam, right?
So why didn't they do that with these guys? Like, you would think that it would be a smart idea not to have a gasoline powered thing that's going to get shot at.
Especially with gasoline up front, you're driving behind 80 gallons of gas. But when they designed this in 1963, Cadillac Gage, which is not part of General Motors, Cadillac Gage did this at risk or at spec, trying to sell it to people. So I think one of the attractions they thought with the Army is, hey, you already have this engine in your supply chain. You already use this engine in the M113. You've got a lot of M113s. The parts are easy to get because you have it.
So it's more of a logistical.
It was a logistical.
Okay, that makes
sense. Remember, they made this at risk. The Army didn't spec this out and say, "Hey, somebody build it."
Yeah, it just the Army kind of just so happened stumbled into it. It was it was meant for the international market more than the U.S. military.
Yeah, so it's free enterprise, right? It's at risk. The company made it and said, "Hey, we're gonna." So that's why it was amphibious. It could seat anywhere from 3 to 11 people. They could use it for riot control. You could use it as an APC. You could use it as an armored fighting vehicle, a scout vehicle.
You know,
somebody buy it. Right?
One thing that I always found interesting about the pamphlets for this thing that you find, you know, from the 60s from Cadillac Gage is that you'll see all of the weapon systems that can be fitted on it.
Oh yeah.
But oddly enough, the one that they didn't mention was the Cadillac Gage Stoner 63.
That's correct.
Which they made, and you would think it would be a no-brainer, and they made a solenoid firing one, which you would think would be perfect, but. I don't know. It's never happened.
It could be they tried it, and you know they really kind of got down on the 7.62 because everybody liked the 50 cal. Once I guess they fired the 50 cal, they want that power to you know busting through the jungle, going through thick grass to really scare people. I mean, the 50 cal is a sight to behold, especially when it's coming your way, I imagine. So basically, the engine. I mean, this has been converted for a little more safety and ease on the street. I have a modern day carburetor. The original Holley carburetor really was problematic even from the day it was made. Used to have a big waterproof bell over it, a big air canister here with the inlet, and this has been converted to 12-volt ignition before I got it.
Okay.
And I've left it at 12 for now. It really is handy to be able to go to Napa and get a distributor cap, wires, coil, in case you know, again, I drive this on the road, so it's nice to be able to get parts.
Can relate.
Yes.
Can relate.
It definitely, I mean, I get it. Some guys are originalists and they're fussy about it. But everything's behind an armored door, so you can see these are 1/4 inch thick.
Yep. All Cadillac?
All Cadillac, right, all armored, and then around the door seal, a little gap at the top. They do still make the seal material. That's this winter's project, is to replace all the seals.
Okay.
Moving around the back, I've upgraded to modern LED tail lights just for safety on the road. Pioneer kit.
How long have you had this thing?
About 20 months. So
okay, so it's a relatively recent
relatively recent, and when I got it, it had already been painted. It was painted about almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago or so.
And as a side note, this is the one that if you Google it, V100, you will see pictures of this exact vehicle for sale on an old listing on
Yes, they tried to sell
website.
it, changed owners a couple times in the early and mid 2000s, and unfortunately had mechanical difficulties, but to their credit, the prior owners took care of it, kept it in the garage, kept it safe. And
it looked. I remember seeing when they first posted it. I remember looking at it like, wow, this is in really good shape. Yeah.
You know, the original paint or the person who did the restoration did a great job. They did all the beautiful artwork on it.
Yeah.
Very talented. Certainly nothing I could replicate with my skill set. So I really focused on the big thing was to get the powertrain.
One question, I'm not sure if you noticed, is obviously this is painted as one of the ones with the Marvel characters on it from that one unit. Was this one of the actual ones, or is this more or less a facsimile?
No, it's basically a tribute. It's really challenging to find one with the original artwork, even underneath the paint. Some guys have been able to sand down and find it. The problem was after the war, they took a lot of these to Letterkenny Army Depot in Pennsylvania around 1972, 73 as they shipped them back from Vietnam. They would put a new powertrain in it. Same engine, same gas engine. That's what mine went through Arsenal rebuild. Put a new transmission, new transportation. Remember, these things had been really thrashed for 3 years of heavy use.
In the jungle.
Yeah, in the jungle, or by anxious 18-year-olds who drove like a maniac on a good day.
And Charlie didn't do you any favors.
That's right. When you're scared and you're during a firefight, you drive it hard. So they basically repowered it, and so at the time, I think a lot of times they had sandblasted the hull or repainted them, so you lost a lot of the original markings.
Of course.
And really hard.
But what about the ID number though? Is that the actual ID number?
This is not the actual ID. The challenge of this vehicle is some V100s had the registration number, which stays with the vehicle for its life, stamped on the side of the hull or on the plate inside the vehicle. This one did not have that plate. So the number on this should be based on the serial number. It should be a little bit higher. It should be about 13A because it was an add-on contract. It should be around in the 130 to 140 range. And then 69 is correct. It denotes the year it was made.
Okay.
So this is the contract number, unit number within that, sequential unit number, and then 69.
And if anyone's building models out there, yeah, those numbers actually mean stuff.
Yes,
it's not just gibberish.
That's correct.
Just
so
letting
if you're making
you guys know.
V100, it should be a 13 or a 13A. The highest I've ever seen for the A models was about 166 to 170 range, and I've seen one or two. There's one I think on display at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, that has a 70 suffix. But for the most part, constructions on these was wrapped up right at the end of 1969. Because
were these being done at being built at the same time as the Air Force model, the one with the pulpit?
Yeah. So you've done an earlier video on the E2 version, which had the more open parapet instead of the turret. I mean, they both did a different function. The advantage of the parapet, you can mount a lot of guns. You don't have to weld anything else on because it already has 6 or so gun mounts, and then an Air Force at an air base where you're going to have a little more open field of fire, and you're going to get a lot of people coming over the wire. Then you'd run a lot of firepower. They could mount a big spotlight up there, so they're really like a almost like a gunship type of idea for that, right? Whereas when you're out on road patrol, it was more important to have nobody could lob a grenade in at you. If you're going to get mortared, etc., and you needed the protection from an ambush, then it was better to have a turret. So they both did different things, but they both did things well. They were just designed for
absolutely. It was, and that's why it's still with us today as the new one.
Yes, the ASV is basically the grandson of this vehicle. So.
And the funny thing is, even after Vietnam, the U.S. military lost all interest basically in this vehicle. But that's not the end of the story, because this was widely popular in foreign sales, and that's when you had the V150 and all the other derivatives of this, and those are still in service in the Philippines, in South America.
Yeah, a lot of V150s are still in police service in the U.S., so you can tell your difference is the V100 uses a heavy-duty deuce axle, so it has 6 lug nuts, and the V150 is basically the same chassis or body, but it has a 5-ton axle, so you'll see 10 lug nuts. And the reason why they needed upgrades is because people kept breaking the Detroit locker. The locking differential in these, it has lockers front and rear, so when you drive in the water, it could swim. All 4 wheels, like paddle wheels. It floats, and then this is your propulsion. It goes about 3 miles an hour when it's swimming, but they started breaking the lockers again. And in Vietnam, they had a lockout where you couldn't put it in first gear, where all the power really is, unless it was in 4-wheel drive to help spread that shock to the driveline to spread it to both axles. Because guys started, well, you know, you're scared or you're in a hurry, obviously. When
and a lot of these guys are 17, 16, they just learned how to drive a car, so, you know, I mean.
This is a big, heavy vehicle, and you got to kind of ease it along, not pop the clutch and do a burnout with it. My brother-in-law was in Vietnam. He calls it the GTO of Vietnam, is what they called it, because it was such a speedy little vehicle to drive around.
And on that note, what's high speed on this thing?
It'll do 60.
Okay.
Originally from the military, it was governed at 62 miles an hour at 4,000 RPM. And I've had this up to 60. It's comfortable. It's like driving a deuce and a half. And you obviously have to use caution when you're operating on the road.
Right. And those mirrors come in handy.
It's pretty comfortable. And I have more modern tires. The original tires were Commando Special.
That's what I was going to ask. I have, because we, for those watching, we've actually been in contact for a while since I'm doing the Model 1. And some of the pictures you sent me have the Commando Special.
That's correct. So this, when I got it, it had the Commando Special tires with 1968, 1969 date stamps. Obviously that's great if you're taking it on and off a trailer at a car show, which is basically what this vehicle was used for. But if you're going to drive it out on the street, these are brand new, modern Goodyear AT2A military tires. Just got those this year, so these.
Oddly enough, these are probably ones used on the current.
Yeah, a lot of the current vehicles. This came from the Goodyear Military Division, so these are used, like I think, on Hemmets, some of the larger off-road tanker trucks. So they're really heavy duty, and they don't have the big thick sidewall that the Commando Specials had.
Those things were pretty impressive.
Yeah, because I don't need run flat. Obviously, I'm not in a combat situation, so I'm not worried about hitting a landmine or having to make it 50 miles.
Well, you're not driving through Newark or anything, so you'll be good. You'll be good.
Any other hostile territory. So yeah, I mean and it actually is a very nice riding vehicle. People think it's really bouncy. The two things that surprise people is it rides nice and it's very quiet. I've had numerous people here at the show when I've been driving it out to put it on display here at the field. They cannot believe how quiet it is. You really can't hear this thing at about 5-10 miles an hour. It just idles very smoothly.
Well, the closest thing I've seen to I haven't seen this one running, but I have seen Gary's running, the Air Force one, and I even have a video of it zipping around a little bit, and it's a very quiet vehicle.
Well, the engine's all enclosed because you have to shut the door.
And the seals help too,
The air comes in through the pagoda cover, which guards against a Molotov cocktail attack. So this is a big, heavy armored air inlet. You can see the radiator tank runs at about a 30-degree angle. So the air comes in, goes through the radiator. Now the fan, the engine's mounted with the fan this way. Most people are used to a fan that draws air in.
Yeah, it blows it out.
It blows it out. It's a pusher fan. So air comes in, circulates, and goes out the back.
And that also acts as your ventilation on the inside.
That's correct.
So right here.
Yeah, if you go inside the vehicle, you can see that door is open and spring-loaded. I opened it today. It works good in the warmer weather because it draws air in as I drive with the doors open. And what this does is it will draw air out of the fighting compartment across the radiator because that pusher fan's now drawing air there and through the pagoda. And so if you've been firing the guns a lot and the cabin is filled with smoke, or it's hot, there's no air conditioning in here, there's no heat, and if you're in Southeast Asia and it's 100 degrees and you're wearing body armor and a helmet and you're out in the hot sun all day long in a dusty convoy, this wasn't built for comfort, it was built for function. So any little bit of airflow you could get, I think was
and what's the crew on this? Obviously driver, gunner, and
so it depends on how they were configured. So you can have 3-man seats. I have a 3-man seat here, I have a 2-man seat over there. It's just easier to get in and out because I'm not an 18-year-old athletic draftee. But you could fit 3 on each side, 2 up front, the driver and the vehicle commander sit in front side by side, a guy in the turret, somebody on the radio, and somebody in the back, which is 11. I don't think I've ever seen any photograph of 11 guys in it. Typically in Vietnam, you're going to have a driver.
Would Arvin possibly? This thing
they used to carry a lot more guys.
Right,
again, you're looking at guys who are...
It would have been a big clown car.
Well, yeah, and you're looking at guys who are, 110 pounds, 120 pounds compared to your average American who's 150, 160, and 5'10".
Yeah.
Most Vietnamese men were probably 5'4" to 5'6" range.
And on that note, that's why they had to redesign the doors like we have here with the split design,
That's
because
correct.
the really early ones just had the top portion that swings open.
That's correct. And then around on the back, when the early ones had, this was all one piece. There was a hinge at the top, and this door was one piece, and you had to lift the entire door.
Yeah.
Which is, each one of these panels is probably about 60, 70 pounds. Now there's spring assist, so they do have a good lift, but it was a big lift, and you had to be able to get it all the way up, I'm sure, to get around the tipping point on the leverage to get the door open. Now even for me, being a little over 6 foot, you still have to have some, it's pretty easy, even for someone a little bit shorter, to get the door open.
And even this way, it's kind of a good design because you can actually just roll it with, or drive with the thing open, and you have some protection at the bottom.
Yes, you can sit in the back, and it's one of the interesting designs. Whenever they made the armor on this, when they knew there was a crewman, you can see inside there's a reinforced plate.
Oh, look at that.
Where the seam is, to make sure that if a bullet ever hit exactly on the seam, and there's a crewman sitting here, and you can see the mounts for the seat belts. I don't have them installed back here.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
There's a crash pad and a bumper for their head, but they gave them that extra protection just to make sure on the that golden BB, right, where the one gets through and hits that seam, and you'll only see that. And there's also the same thing in the turret. So where there was a crewman present and there was a seam in the armor, they added that reinforcing.
That's a really cool.
Well, that's a level of detail.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that in the books. That's a good one.
So I kind of figured that one out by looking at like, why did they do that? And then it dawned on me, it's just to give you. I mean, it could happen, right? If somebody got you exactly on the spot and you're sitting on the other side of that, it gives you at least.
Ballistics is a weird thing.
It certainly is. So it's, overall it was a good multi-purpose vehicle, and as pointed out earlier, they just kind of discarded it after Vietnam.
It's like one of the things where the brass didn't really know what to do with it. The Air Force tend to keep them.
Yes,
for a little bit.
Some of them were at air bases in Japan or the Philippines, Air Force bases overseas in Asia, because I think they probably went from Vietnam to another nearby.
That makes sense.
Friendly country. They're already over there, right?
Right.
So the logistics wasn't bad. And they kept those, some of them I think into the late 70s, early 80s, I've read.
Yeah.
But after time, of course, the logistics get tough, right? The day-to-day maintenance on this isn't bad, but if you start getting into serious engine repair, you have to pull the powertrain out of the roof.
Well, look at the Stryker MGS. They just phased that out after only like a couple decades of service. Now, that's out.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that my own personal view is that the military armor is expensive. It's heavy. It wears out tires. It uses a lot of fuel. And unless you really have an immediate need for armor, they tend to switch back. Like they dropped all this stuff and went to Humvees because they got better fuel economy, more in line with the defending Europe type of mission.
Yeah, until it comes to a situation where you're getting shot at, then that's right, we need armor.
Especially with insurgents, right?
Yeah.
Where, the insurgents quickly figure out that they can't attack a tank or an armored column.
Yeah, they just let the Abrams go by with the Bradleys, and then there goes the fuel truck.
They're after the fuel trucks, exactly. And so that's when these really hit their high water mark of the utility to the Army as convoy escorts.
Yeah.
And they were really good at that because with the top speed of 50, 60 miles an hour and hard in this thing, you can certainly keep right up with the deuce.
Absolutely.
Or you could speed across a large airbase and go from, if air bases are 2 miles wide or you have a 5'8", 10,000 foot runway, you could make it down the runway in a hurry.
Did the Marines ever use these? Because I have seen some with Marine markings. I don't know if that's just fantasy or...
Yeah, apparently in the mid-70s I've read, there were a couple that were used at a couple naval bases. Usually if you began to guard nuclear submarine bases, nuclear weapons depot after the war, that's where some of these were overhauled and were used to guard major installations, either maritime installation or weapons depot.
Okay.
But a lot of them were used to target targets on impact target on a range, and unfortunately that's where most of them kind of met their doom.
Also, I'm not sure if you know any info on this. There is one preserved example in the AAF museum, either in Virginia or the one in Connecticut. It's either one or the other.
Yep.
And it has the Summer Verdant Merc camouflage pattern on it.
Right.
And it was just interesting seeing a V100 with a Merc on it, because that means it was in service in the 70s and the 80s.
That's correct.
When they went to that.
Some of them did. I think I've read that they were used by a couple of units in Europe. I think the first Cav were like a scouting element, and so they had the European applied camouflage. I have seen pictures of them in the snow in Germany from the 70s. So apparently some were made, some were camouflaged. In Vietnam, the controversy rages, but there was one photograph of a V100 with the turret, meaning the M-706.
Okay.
That was camouflaged. The only other ones that were normally camouflaged.
The Air Force.
The Air Force.
And it's funny. It literally looks like an F4 Phantom.
Yeah, they are very cool.
It's the same paint
like
job.
them in camouflage.
They look hot. They look hot. The
really
linebacker paint
good.
jobs look awesome.
Yes.
They
There's one that was in the walk-around book that was published. It was kind of in the more European post-war, and you can see the interior of that one is painted white, which they did after the rebuild period in the 70s.
Well, there is that one example of one of these in Ho Chi Minh City, or I'm just gonna say Saigon because it's Saigon, and. The interior, it's all original, and it's just rusty as hell because it's just left outdoors with the hatches open, and the interior is white on that one.
You know, that's another great point where the controversy kind of rages whether they were seafoam green or white. I've been told if they were Vietnam, produced in the 60s, they were green. And even the floor was green, so you even see mine, and most of the ones we paint the floor black, but like a texture finish because it gets slippery, obviously.
And just to note, the one that's in the museum, it's not like it was, Arvin was, obviously Arvin didn't last long, so it's as fresh as
it could have been used. The North Vietnamese still use them. I've seen a few YouTube videos where they still have these.
Well, they all have M48. All of our M48A3s, they still have.
I'm sure it's like in their more like in their reserve stuff that they keep in a depot somewhere. If they.
Well, they don't throw anything away.
Right. Well, these things are worth a lot of money in the day, and I'm sure if you're a developing nation like that at the time, it was cost effective to keep them, so it may have been painted then. I don't know if maybe they don't have seafoam green or they don't like that color.
Well, the thing is, though, it's also interesting to point out that you even see the original labels for all the equipment on the inside. Those stickers, and they're all in English, and they're as weathered as the inside. So
that's a great challenge, right? You always see ones that it shouldn't be that way,
right? And
yet there it is, and you never know if it was done locally, if it was left that way at the factory, if they changed specifications in the middle of a contract run. They said we're out of seafoam green, we have white, or
it could even be a refurb, like the thing caught fire or something, and they repainted it and they just have flat white.
It could be the in-service. It could have been repaired and sent back from a depot back into service. And I know the thing with these is they were really in urgent demand in Vietnam, so pretty much as soon as they were built, the Cadillac Gage in Michigan, they were shipped.
How many were built in total?
I know that I think there's about 1,000 that were built. Now, whether that was just the ones that were built for the American Army and the ARVN Army in Vietnam service, and then there were additional different serial number ranges that were sent to the Philippines and to some other smaller nations around the world, I'm not sure. The rule of thumb is about, or at least the gospel to me, was about 1,000 were built for Vietnam, and about 80 to 100 survive today back in the States, mostly at museums. Not many are privately owned, and not many that are privately owned are running because they're really a lot of maintenance.
There's a few gate guards, I think, floating around.
You'll find them at some of the military museums have them. Some guys who own them kind of get into them, and it's a lot of work to restore it, or like this one, somebody didn't want to drive it on the street, and they liked it. They put their time and effort, thankfully, into doing a beautiful restoration on the exterior. They got it presentable, get it out in front of the public via trailer, and then maybe the next level is, okay, once that's done, the new owner like me comes along and I have renewed enthusiasm, right?
Fresh start,
right. I'm the newest one, and working on the powertrain and get it going again on the street. So.
Well, it's an excellent piece. Hopefully, I could hang around and see when you actually drive this thing around. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Do that. Yep.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and do that.
All right.
Let's hop in this thing.
For a minute, we'll get it set up.
All right, let's cut across when this thing is zipping around.
I guess I can make a right, maybe we'll do a zigzag out there. They don't seem to mind if I drive across the grass, so try to be respectful of people want. Push is good. Okay, you ready?
Yep, all set. You weren't kidding.
then it comes more like driving a truck.
So while editing this video, I realized that I forgot to film an outro, so I will take the opportunity to first give my special thanks and appreciation to the owner of this vehicle, Mr. Scott, who graciously allowed me to not only interview him, but also he allowed me full access to thoroughly photograph and film the vehicle in question, which, by the way, the pictures can be found on the ECA Facebook page, and the video has been posted on the ECA channel. And that is the perfect point to sign off on this video, and if you enjoyed the content that you just watched, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. That is a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being real military vehicle videos like the ones that you just watched, or the typical type of videos that I produce, which are involving small and large scale military models. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of this particular vehicle, as well as the other small and large scale models that I just referenced. Finally, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Take care.